as a result of speaking to lots of different people in the music industry and a lot of my clients. I'm talking to people from all over the world. I'm lucky enough to talk to people all over the world, throughout the week, directly having multiple conversations, and that kind of allows me to get a certain perspective, which I hope you will find valuable during these very difficult times. So, what I have been noticing a fair few people saying is something like, when everything goes back to normal, I will da 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 da, or we'll be able to, yeah. Now, I believe that that could be something of a problem if they mean by normal the way it was before. Because, one of the ways that we can effectively move forward through uncertain situations is to be realistic. In fact, I'm a huge optimist. You may have noticed, but how I can be optimistic is by protecting the downside, by actually looking realistically about worst case scenarios as well as best case scenarios, because once you've done that and once you've planned for that, then you have the freedom to be optimistic about what could happen, right? So this involves a certain amount of realism and looking at things as they are, not as you would wish them to be. So if you're thinking, okay, so when everything goes back to normal, I'm going to do this. Yeah. If you're thinking by normal the way it was before, then I don't think that's ever going to happen. We're not going to go back, to the same world that there was before this crisis. And this isn't necessarily all a bad thing. If you think that I'm spreading doom and gloom, it's not necessarily all a bad thing. Obviously, what is happening right now is terrible. It's a tragedy. It's a catastrophe. However, it's not all going to be bad. Just because it's different doesn't make it bad. Okay? So a way that I've kind of used with quite a few of my clients to get them to sort of view this slightly differently is that idea or that theory in physics that there are multiple universes existing at the same time, parallel universes, and in each universe, basically everything that could possibly has happened, it could happen, has happened. Yes, so there's an infinite number of universes. Okay, hello, Stefan. Good to see you. So the way I'm thinking about this is that when the tsunami hit of this, global crisis, essentially what happened, this was a point at where we moved 100 universes along. Okay, so we can't go back to the universe we were in before this crisis hit. Yeah, we're now in a whole different universe. Okay. Now, why is this a useful way of thinking about what's going on? Well, I don't know if you've heard of the different stages of grief, although they're not exactly stages, because apparently, as far as I've found out, they don't happen in a sequence. But I don't know all of them off by heart, but I think it's something like anger, denial, bargaining, something else, and acceptance is one of them. Yeah, and I think in order to move through the crisis and come out the other side better for it, yeah, then we need to, as soon as possible, as soon as we humanly can, and this is a process, we need to reach that acceptance. I mean, I think, having spoken to lots of people, and I'll make another video about this, I think, but having spoken to lots of people, I have noticed that it is kind of a bit like a grieving process that we're all going through. A grieving process for what we thought our lives were going to be like. Okay? So the quicker we can get to acceptance, the more clearly we can look at the various different things that we can do to help other people, to help ourselves, to look after our families. Because in this current situation, while we can be certain that we're not going back to that other universe, 100 universes away, it might even be 1,000 or 1,000,000 universes away, but while we can be certain we can't go back, there's not an enormous amount we can actually be certain of. Making predictions in this situation becomes almost impossible, certainly for the lay person such as myself. Okay? And by the way, if you're currently struggling with feelings of anxiety and fear because of these because of this kind of sense of a lack of control and certainty, then watch the video that I've linked to in the description or the post. Okay. So in this situation, we can't really make set predictions about exactly what is going to happen because we're in an entirely new universe. But there are still things we can be relatively certain of. Okay. And where I watched, I can't remember what it was. I think it was a video of Jeff Bezos talking at something, and somebody was asking him, "What is going to be different in 10 years? I.e., what new things are you going to do with Amazon to account for how things are going to be different in 10 years?" And he replied back with something that's really stuck with me. He said, "Well, actually, that's not the first question I ask. I ask, what's not going to change in 10 years?" Okay, and that's a really powerful question. Okay, so if we use that question in terms of the music industry, or music, because obviously that's what I do, then let's just think about what isn't going to change. Okay, and these are just a few examples I came up with, right? Number one, what isn't going to change is that people are still going to want music. And right now, people want music more than ever. So if you're somebody who is currently going, what's the point? What's the point in making music? Who wants music? We've got bigger things to think about. I would say that that's entirely wrong-headed. You want to question that because, what does music do? It brings us out of ourselves. It allows us to kind of process difficult emotions. It does all kinds of really important things. But one thing we can be sure of when on the other side of this, people will still want music. That's one thing we can be sure of. The second thing we can be sure of is that as long as we do still exist, which is always a possibility, who knows what's going to happen, right? As long as we still exist, that there will be a music industry. Right now, there's not a live industry at all. There is still a music industry, but there will still be a music industry at the other side of this. But what we can also be sure of, it will look very different to what it looked like before this. Okay, we can know that for sure. Another thing that we can be sure of, which is about how the music industry will look different, is that people will be more used to consuming live music online via streams as well. One of the reasons I've been banging on about how live streaming is such a big deal, such a game changer for musicians for years, absolutely years. And now, in a wholly unexpected way, this is it really has to be a big deal. It's kind of the only way that we can see live music. Yeah. But one of the reasons it has taken such a long time to kind of build up any steam, it was kind of bubbling under for absolutely ages, was because nobody had got used to it. Nobody had created the habits around it. Nobody had kind of got their heads around what it is to consume a kind of live experience on a stream. And in fact, most musicians still haven't figured out, including me, still haven't figured out how to actually, what is special about live streaming. Because, they're thinking of live streaming as, a worse gig, or maybe a TV show. It's actually a completely different thing when you think about it. There are certain things that you can do in live streaming that you can't do in a live show. That's where the real gold is, But all of this to say, one thing we can be sure of is that a lot of habits are changing in terms of consumers. Yeah, they are going to get used to, they're going to start to expect things from their musicians that they didn't before. Okay, what they are exactly, I'm not sure, but we can be sure that they will do. Yeah. Another thing that we can be sure of is that, and this is a sad fact, but certainly on the other side of this immediately, there's going to be less competition. Now, as I said, this is a sad fact, but it's a kind of a cyclical thing. If it wasn't a global pandemic, it could have been something else. But there is a cyclical thing, very similar to the Australian bushfires that happen here, is that nature just has a way of destroying before allowing more green shoots to grow. Destruction is unfortunately a necessary part of creation. So there's going to be a lot of people who will have been in music who maybe were making music for not the best reasons, or maybe that weren't that into it. They just, they thought of things in, a particular way, and they are probably not going to be still doing it on the other side of this. And this is going to be very painful for a lot of people, and I'm very sad about that. I'm not applauding it in any way. I'm just talking about what we can be sure of. Yeah, I'm not judging this. Yeah, it's just the way it is. So there's going to be less competition. Yeah. So people want music. There will be a music industry. People will be more used to consuming live music online, and there will be less competition. So with all of those things said, the other thing we can be sure of is that those who invest their time now figuring out how to directly engage and build a direct relationship with their fan base online will have a huge advantage when the recovery begins. Because this is the other thing that we can be sure of. There will be a recovery. We don't know when it will be. We don't know how it will happen. We don't know how bad things are going to get before it happens. But as long as this planet and humankind still exists, which I'm fairly sure in saying is going to happen, okay? As long as those conditions are met, there will be a recovery, okay? But to say that there will be a recovery is not to say that we're going to get back to normal. There is no normal anymore. We are 100 universes away from normal, maybe 1,000. Yeah? The world that we will live in when that happens, the music industry that exists when that happens, will not be what we now think of as normal. And that is a terrible thing in many ways, but also in that understanding, in the acceptance of that fact, is where you will find your opportunities to thrive in the future. So that's my little soapbox moment for the day. Good to see you, Ashley, Matt, Jamie, and Manuel. I'm going to sign off now for a bit. Make sure you check the link if you want, if you've been feeling a little bit anxious, can't sleep or anything, about this kind of feeling of uncertainty and control. And I will see you very soon again. As ever, onwards and upwards.